All right, this is Math 209, Week 2, Section 6.4. We're still doing some more factoring of trinomials. And this collection of trinomials is actually going to be kind of easy to factor because they're all going to follow a particular pattern. So you've got x squared plus 6x plus 9. And we know, using that box, that the x squared is going to go here, the positive 9 is going to go here, and then how do you get x squared? Well, that's easy. That's x times x. And then how do you get 9? Well, you have some choices. You could, for 9, you could have 1 and 9, or you could have 3 and 3. And so I like to start with the numbers that are closest to each other. You're going to find that that's often a good place to start. So if we start with 3 and 3, that's going to give us 9, ignoring the signs right now. So multiplying to get our two internal terms, you've got 3x and 3x. And sure enough, we want 6x. So that means this needs to be positive and this needs to be positive. So that means everything's nice and positive. And so our factors right here become x plus 3 times x plus 3. And that is our factor. So if we combined our like terms here, of course we would get that. All right, so more of the same. So you've got x squared minus 10x plus 25. All right, so when we make our box over here, we know that we're going to have x squared here. We're going to have positive 25 here. And so how do you get x squared? Well, you get x times x. And then how do you get positive 25? Well, you got 5 times 5. And really right now we're kind of ignoring the signs. So now we're going to multiply to get our two internal terms. So you get 5x here and 5x here. But now here's the thing. We need these guys to combine to equal negative 10x. So how do we get negative 10x? Well, that means both of these guys have to be negative, which means this is negative 5 and this is negative 5, because that's how we're going to get negative 5 times x is negative 5x. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. And we still preserve that positive 25 because negative 5 times negative 5 gives us positive 25. So what are our factors? It's x minus 5 times x minus 5. And that is your answer. So here's more of the same. You've got, let's see, 9y squared plus 12y plus 4. So going over here. Now, it looks like we have choices, but we're going to go with a nice little educated guess. So let's think about 9y squared. Well, that's a square, because 3y times 3y gives us 9y squared. And then similarly, 4 is 2 times 2. Yes, 4 could have been 1 times 4, but we're really going to start with squares. So now let's multiply. Oh, by the way, this is a positive term. Okay, so now we're going to multiply to get our internal terms. So that gives us 6y and 6y. Now, how can we combine these guys to get a positive 12y? Well, that makes this a positive 6y and a positive 6y, which makes this a positive 2 and that a positive 2. And so our factors over here become 3y plus 2 times 3y plus 2. And that is our factors. More of the same, just the numbers are getting bigger and they're trying to scare us, I guess, a little bit. So what do we have? We have 36x squared minus 60x plus 25. So we're going to draw our box over here. And we've got 36x squared, and we've got positive 25. Now, keeping in mind that's supposed to be a negative 60x, right? So I see that both of these are squares. I see 6x times 6x, and I see 5 times 5. All right? So when we fill in our internal terms, we got 30x and 30x. But we see that when we combine our terms, we want a negative 60x. So that means both of these have to be negative, making these 5's negative, and so our factors become 6x minus 5 times 6x minus 5. And there is our answer. By the way, that works because negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. And so everything works. All right, so still factoring. And so we've got 64y squared plus 48y plus 9. So when we make our box, we see, of course, 64y squared goes here, and 9 goes here, and we see that they are both of these guys are squares. This is 8y times 8y, and then 9 is 3 times 3. So filling in our internal terms gives us, let's see, 24y and 24y. And then when we're looking at this, we want these guys to combine to equal positive 48y. So that means this needs to be a positive 24y, and that needs to be a 24y, positive 24y. So that makes these 3's positives. So we end up with 8y plus 3 times 8y plus 3. And that is our factors. So here, more of the same kind of concept. So you've got 16a squared minus 8a plus 1. So we're going to draw our box. And we know that that's 16a squared, and we know that this is positive 1. And we can see that both of these are squares. So this is 4a times 4a, and this is 1 times 1. So now when we fill in our internal terms, we get 4a and 4a. But here's the kicker. When we combine these terms, we want the answer to be negative 8a, which means both of these need to be negative 4a's, which means this one needs to be a negative 1, and this one needs to be a negative 1, because that's how you're going to get those answers. And sure enough, negative 1 times negative 1 gives us the positive 1. And so our factors are 4a minus 1 times 4a minus 1. So this is the same, only they're trying to scare us with uglier numbers. So you got x squared plus 16xy plus 64y squared. All right. So when I draw my box over here, I know that x squared is going to go here, and I know that 64y squared is going to go way over here, And I can see that both of those numbers are squares. So I've got x times x right here, and I've got 8y times 8y right here. And when I filled, oh, by the way, that's supposed to be a positive, so I should put the positive there, right there. And so when I fill in our internal terms, we get 8xy and 8xy. And I want it to be 16, I want it to be positive 16xy. So how do I get that? Well, both of those have to be positives, which makes this a positive 8y and that a positive 8y. So our factors over here becomes x plus 8y times x plus 8y. And there are our factors. And then here you've got a squared minus 16ad plus 64d squared. So we're going to start with our box. And we know that a squared goes here and 64d squared goes there. And we see that both of these are squares. For a, well, that's a times a. And then for 64d squared, by the way, that should be a positive. I should put that positive there. And so 64d squared, well, that's 8d and 8d. So when we fill in our internal terms here, that gives us 8ad and 8ad. But when we combine these terms, we want it to be a negative 16ad. So we're going to we want both of those numbers to be negatives. And so, what does that mean about this 8d? That's got to be a negative. And then this has to be a negative. And sure enough, when we multiply negative 8d times negative 8d, you get 64d squared, positive 64d squared. So our factors, a minus 8d times a minus 8d. There are our factors. And the last one is, let's see, 9x squared minus 12xy plus 4y squared. Alright, so when we draw our box, we're going to get 9x squared right there. We're going to get positive 4y squared there. And we need to recognize that both of those are squares. So that's 3x times 3x and 4y times 4y. So when we write in our internal terms, we're going to get 12xy and 12xy. Now heads up, because if you look at it, how are you going to get these two numbers to equal 12xy? You're not. That's because this term, this trinomial right here, is probably going to be prime because it doesn't work. You know, when you look at this as squares, so that's 3x times 3x. Oh, you know what? That's because it's not supposed to be 4y's. What are those supposed to be? Those are supposed to be 2y's. So that's 3x and 3x. This is supposed to be 2y and 2y. Now it's going to work. So when we put it in our internal terms, that's going to be 6xy. This is going to be 6xy. And then, but we want it to be negative 12xy. So these guys need to combine to make negative 12xy. So they've got to be both negatives, making these both negative 2y's. And so our factors are 3x minus 2y times 3x minus 2y. And that's our factors.